So this past September, my wife and I, Jackie, she's in the second row. You want to wave your hands in the air? You just don't care? All right, there it is. Jackie and I, we celebrate our 17th wedding anniversary, which we're fired up about. Which means, that means that 7 years ago, Jackie and I had our 10-year vow renewal, which was super special. We had a little ceremony in San Diego. Chris and Meryl Vinon, if you know them, they came and they officiated the wedding, and we had speeches, and we rocked Italian food on the Coronado Bay. A friend of mine wrote a song and performed it. On top of that, because it was our vow renewal, all of our kids got to be there and dance and have fun, and it was such a special night. Matter of fact, it was such a good night. One of my friends came up to me and said, "Andy, that was way better than my actual wedding." And I was like, "Dude, your wife is right there." But anyways, it was a night where Jack and I reflected and we looked back at our relationship. It started when we were young and immature. We met in high school. We're like a throwback relationship. And so that means we've got to see each other at our most immature moments. And so we got to reflect on how far God has brought us. I mean, there's still a ways we need to go, but we can go, man, God has done a lot in our life. We're not those kids we were at 15, 14. And it was a time of reflection on our time together so far, but also it was a time to think about where we were going next. And birthdays and anniversaries and New Year's, they're helpful that way because they can be a natural time to look back and remember where we have come from, where we have been, where we want to go. And in the meantime, to be honest about ourselves, hey, where have we kind of gotten off track a little bit? And maybe we're even betraying our own values for who we want to be. A lot of churches right now are doing that same thing. A lot of Christians, not just churches and Christians, by the way, people are doing this. The pandemic was like this really long reflective time where people are like, hey, where's my life going? A lot of people are switching careers left and right now. A lot of people are leaving their marriages right now. They're changing their friendship groups in some significant ways. Some people aren't just changing offices, they're changing entire careers. They're going back to school. They're reevaluating their relationship with food and with alcohol and with substances and with their phones and with exercise and with finances and where they should live and should they buy a house, should they be by family, not be by family. And so there's all this transition happening right now in our culture. And we felt that in the church. I have a lot of pastor friends. The data says that in America during the pandemic, 35% of American Christians left their church. Only half of them came back. Which means you're at about 20% of the people in every church, about 1 in 5, are no longer here. And they're no longer in community. And the other thing is even those who come back, what we're finding is, the data says this, but if you talk to pastors anecdotally too, so many people who come back are way less connected than they used to be. The relationship wasn't what it used to be. A mentor of mine, a guy named John Dennert, he often teaches on the principle of spiritual drifting. And it's this idea that as sinful human beings in a fallen world, without intentionality, we will always drift away from the important things in life. Things that are either bad for us or are trivial. So it's kind of like a boat without an engine or without a sail up. You just kind of drift to something. And often that something, again, could be awful. It ranges from trivial to awful. It's never where you want to go. Because, again, we live in a fallen world, and we're a fallen people being redeemed. And so we don't accidentally drift towards Jesus, his people, or his purposes. And so today, I want to call you to reevaluate, where are you right now? Like maybe you started out, and again, if you're 1 degree off when you start a journey, a couple miles down the road, you're in a very different place than where you thought you would be. And what I want to ask today is would you be willing to honestly think through where you're at with both Jesus and his church? Jesus loves the church. It's his bride. It's his body. The church is the only thing Jesus is coming back for. And what I want to ask is, have you drifted from Jesus and his church? For many people, I think it's unintentional. There's just so much in our culture that's pushing us away from this. I know Brad taught on this at the Family of Churches retreat. Expressive individualism says the greatest sin is to tell someone to do something they don't want to do. That's uncomfortable emotionally, or disagree with them. Church does that all the time. Not just the pastor and the preacher. If you're with people who are different than you, they're going to rub up against you. It's uncomfortable, and you don't like it. And so even before the pandemic, it was countercultural to practice local church membership. Even before the pandemic, Southern California is a place ravaged by something that I like to call commitment phobia. In San Diego, it plays out all the time. I think it happens in LA too. You ever text a friend and remind them, not invite them, remind them, hey, don't forget, guys, tonight that thing's happening. Looking forward to seeing you. They've already RSVP'd yes, and they respond with, I think I'll be there. What do you mean you think? Something might come up. And something might come up means I might not feel like coming. I might be tired when the time rolls around. Aziz Ansari, the comedian, once joked that before texting existed, if you made plans with your buddy Phil to grab a beer at 8 p.m. and Phil wasn't there by 8:15, Phil was dead. We see this play out in romantic relationships. I used to be a college pastor, and we would encourage people to have these things called DTRs, which I know sounds very close to a weird thing. Back in the day, we didn't have that thing. It was just DTR, and it was define the relationship. Define the relationship. And because what would happen is people would kind of want to kick it, hang out, get to know each other. We call it freighting. You kind of just friends with emotional benefits. And they would get to know each other, and they would kick it. And they would even, we had one guy who went to NorCal with a girl. They've been spending a lot of time together. They're on the phone every night doing the you hang up, no, you hang up, you hang up thing. They go up for Thanksgiving, meet the parents. On the way back, the girl says, I'm so glad you're my boyfriend. And the guy was like, I'm not your boyfriend. Right? Dating apps are a way to meet people. I'm not going to villainize dating apps. But when you think through things like dating apps and then stuff that's even darker, like pornography, even our sexuality and our romantic life is consumerized, where we look at people and go, do I want that? Do I want that? Do I want that? In such a blatant way. And guys, that seeps into the church. I try to find something that's fun for me in the moment, and as long as it's meeting my needs, I'll kick it and enjoy it. And when it's no longer meeting those needs, I move on. So we take and then we move on. Where God's desire for the church is that there would be this interdependent, mutual, kind of reciprocal relationship amongst brothers and sisters, that there are seasons where you're going to just need to not take to receive. I've had men and women have had to look at some of the hardest moments of their life and just say, you're just going to need to receive for a season. And that's okay. That's not a lifestyle, though. Does that make sense? A marriage, that can't be the lifestyle of a marriage where one spouse just receives. Best case, it's a really draining relationship. Worst case, it's abusive. And so God desires interdependent relationships where we commit to one another. And so are you committed to one another? Are you committed to this church? In particular, are you committed to this space where the church gathers? Again, in the Western church, the church is something we consume, but we rarely give, commit, and covenant to. So, for example, we might attend a gathering when we're feeling spiritual or slept good the night before. Check. Commit to reorient my weekend schedule with the Sunday gathering in mind, sacrificing experiences and sleep to be there. No way. Attend a church gathering in a building paid for by the church fund and receive from a staff that is supported by the offerings of the church. Check. Commit to give a sizable chunk of my own money to the same church each month that can be counted on, barring a change in income. Come on, man. Is this a cult? Hang out with people who make me feel super good about myself? Check. Work out conflicts with them when they make me feel super bad about myself? Nah, I got to cut the haters out of my life, man. Right? So practicing meaningful church membership before the pandemic was countercultural, and it's even more countercultural now. Now, here's the thing. God's heart for the church isn't just that we would hang out together. It's that we would go out and change the world. We're called to mercy and justice and making disciples and evangelism. We're called to see the gospel change everything in this world. Again, we have a small part to play, but it's an important part to play. And we want to play it well. And if you actually do the Jesus stuff, you'll find that it's really exhausting. Jesus himself, he pours himself out healing and teaching and blessing and giving people back their dignity and loving. And he often retreated and had to pray and be with the Father, but not just by himself. He often would do it with his disciples. It's a unique fact. He got together with the crew and they pressed into Jesus together. Jesus was an observant Jew, which also means he would have gone to temple pretty much his entire life. He would have sat under rabbis' sermons. How crazy is that? It's like Isaiah 53 is like, I know where this is going. And so if Jesus needed spiritual nourishment, how much more do you and I need spiritual nourishment? Acts chapter 2, famous passage of scripture looking at the early church. Every church planner wants it to be their church until they realize this church was messed up too. Acts chapter 2, verse 42 to 47, it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. So they devote themselves to this thing. The apostles' teaching is the teaching about Jesus, from the Old Testament about Jesus. To the fellowship, fellowship's the word koinonia. Fellowship is like relationship through suffering. Like someone that you went through something hard with together. Does that make sense? Families who lose a beloved loved one, they're going through koinonia. Don't think like mac and cheese in the fellowship hall. That could be a part of it. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you guys actually have a fellowship hall now. You've got a building. You got stuff happening. We're like the back of the cafeteria. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just fellowship's more than that. Fellowship is like we've been through the fire together and come out the other side. That's koinonia. We're being persecuted together. We're grieving together. We're sacrificing for one another. Then there's the breaking of bread. They're eating together. They're taking communion together. They're praying together. And so it says they devoted themselves to that. It's like, this is what I'm about. This is what I'm moving towards. And then something happens. It says everyone was filled with awe. And many wonders and signs were being performed through the apostles. Now, all the believers were together and held all things in common. By the way, that's not communism or socialism or whatever. It's not saying no one could have anything. It's saying no one should have nothing. It's saying, I'm going to make sure my brothers and sisters have what they need. There's wealthy people and poor people in the churches in the New Testament. And it doesn't say that being poor or being rich is a sin, but it's saying we need to take care of one another. It says they sold their possessions and property and distributed the proceeds to all as any had need, so those who have need. Every day they devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple and broke bread from house to house. They ate their food with joyful and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And then that last line, every day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. So like what happens here leads to a bunch of people coming to know Jesus. We know later in Acts that healing starts to break out, and justice starts to break out, and more evangelism starts to break out. And it flows from the worship gatherings. It's so interesting. They're doing these really hard things. They're standing up against persecution, preaching the gospel boldly. And where are they finding their power? It's in these gatherings. Like they go down deep and allows them to go out far. There's a part of Acts where it says that the biggest opponents of the gospel, it says that priests were being saved, Pharisees were being saved. Think about some of the biggest people who are opposed to the gospel in today's culture. Imagine leaders of whole groups that hate what the church stands for coming to know Jesus. Okay? Acts goes, they gathered and were empowered together, and then they went out, and then God just did his thing through them, and people's lives were being restored and changed. So it says they were devoted to the church as in one another, but they were also devoted to gathering with one another, and the gathering was like their lifeblood. It gave them the nutrients they needed. It was almost like food they needed to run a race. Energy they needed, spiritual energy to get things done, empowerment. Again, now here's what's hard is we still need this. We still need, all of us, we live in we live in the world. We have a flesh. There is an enemy. And there's a lot, and again, we're not just drifting, there's often even winds coming that want to take us in a direction. And all of us need to be regrounded and nourished. All of us need to remember who we are, whose we are, where we are, what really matters in life, and where we're going. There's a lot of competing gospels. They're all over social media and the media and Netflix and in your family of origin and in your own heart and and demonic whispers. Like all around you, there's things telling you this is what really matters. This is who you are. Just think about the lies you believe about your own identity. This gathering is designed to combat those consistently. And it's not magic, okay? And I would say the gathering is like food. It's like a family meal together. You can, if you stop eating, you'll stop having energy, okay? Now, if you stopped eating and then you didn't have energy, you can't be like, I ate a hamburger a year ago. Food doesn't work. No, this is an unsexy, consistent thing you do that over time changes your heart and your worldview in a good way. It brings us back. But it's hard, man. I've heard stories of Christians in China who walk over an hour each way at night at the threat of their life to gather with other believers for worship. When I hear stories like that, I feel inspired, but I also feel kind of ashamed. We have people miss gathering at our church sometimes for football games. And there's times like, I wish I was with them. And these guys risking their life. Even in our own country, my wife grew up in the Black Pentecostal church tradition with her dad and her grandfather. And man, they go 5 hours. Sabbath's 5 hours. You're entering your day. You have quite a sermon. You've got prophetic words throughout it. You have impromptu songs, plus the songs that were planned, plus a saxophone solo. Then it happens. Then you have like Sunday school together. Then you have lunch together. Okay, kids are there the whole time. I mean, they have kids ministry, but then they're back in and stuff. And my point is like, they're like, hey, this is just part of our life. This is what we do. I think part of it is they're in a lower income area and they're not like doing weekend trips to whatever, Denver or whatever. But they go, man, I'll reorient my life around this community. Like this is what I do and stuff. But it's hard, man. Sunday gatherings are hard to devote yourself to because life gets so busy. We've got all these messages pulling us away. Plus gatherings can be so long and the sermons can be really long. Last time I was here, I preached over an hour. Brad, he said, man, can I adjure you? Will you preach for 45 minutes, please? And I said, man, I'm going to pray about it, dude. I'm going to do my best. Okay, we've got 27 minutes to go. One author writes, I assume you're like me. I can get itchy-skinned and scratchy throat after an hour or so of church. I can get distracted and cranky when it goes too long. My feet ache. My backside numbs. My eyes glaze, my mind fogs, my belly growls. I find myself fighting back yawns and then not fighting them back anymore. I let them gape and roar, a signal to my oppressors, let my people go. And I'm the pastor. Again, this is not a new problem. Acts chapter 20, my favorite stories in the Bible, says, on the first day of the week, Sunday, we assembled to break bread. Paul spoke to them. So again, Paul's coming in, apostolic leaders, kind of like me coming into this. I'm going to preach this morning. Then I'm going to go encourage GC leaders tonight. I'm going to meet with people and encourage them on the staff team, volunteer teams. And I'm going to be doing that. And I'm going to be doing a lot of talking. Not because I think I'm the most important person in the world, but I'm here for a limited amount of time. And I want to give what I have while I'm here, which leads to a lot of talking. Now, Paul, I'm in good company. The Apostle Paul says he spoke to them and says he was about to depart the next day. He's like, we have finite time, guys. We got to make the most of this time. He kept on talking until midnight. There were many lamps in the room upstairs where we were assembled. And a young man named Eutychus was sitting on a windowsill and sank into a deep sleep as Paul kept on talking. I love Luke's emphasis, you guys. He gets you. When he was overcome by sleep, he fell down the third story and was picked up dead. Death by sermon. But I love this. But Paul went down, he bent over him, he embraced him and said, don't be alarmed because he's alive. Raises him from the dead. Now, I don't know about you guys. You talk for a long time, someone dies over the matter. You know, this is where we know Paul is single. His wife was like, hey man, we should go. She's like grabbing his leg. She's like, hey. Paul goes, after going upstairs, breaking the bread and eating, Paul talked a long time until dawn. It's like, all right, cool, second half. They brought the boy home alive and were greatly comforted. I have too many stories about people falling asleep while I was talking, so I'm going to let those go for time's sake. But again, the church has always struggled with gatherings. People have always been human. Preachers have always been human. Worship leaders have always been human. Communion's always been made of natural materials that God does something special with, but that on paper aren't that cool. We had recently, we had a kid, he ran, at our church, we had the communion table with the big loaf, and Nicole family, you guys know her, she made it look all pretty and cute, and a kid, he's like 6, he runs to the front, grabs the communion loaf like a football, and just dips. And our kids director's like, he loves the sacraments, And it's just like, this feels so unholy, it feels so profane, it sounds so like human, And gatherings are human, but God chooses to use human, foolish things to change people's lives. Like you being here matters, not just for what you get out of it. This is why sermons, there's a theologian named N.T. Wright from England. He's a brilliant guy. He calls sermons audible sacraments. He doesn't think you should post them online because he thinks it's the moment is the sermon, not the content. He goes, you don't redo communion. You don't go, hey guys, if you want some of 2 weeks ago's communion, got that on, by the way, we put our sermons online, but I just want you to think about what we think of this time, that it's sacred. When prophetic words are shared in the Spirit, when we get together and the Spirit speaks to someone and they speak up and testify to the congregation and God's doing things, you don't redo that at the second service. Baptisms, you don't redo baptisms online. Like, hey, we did a video, we redid it to show you this cool baptism, right? If a spontaneous song happens, that this is about the Spirit doing something in people. There's nothing wrong with like content and reading books and stuff. It's just not a gathering of God's people, and it doesn't replace it. You can listen to the best worship bands in the world and the best preachers in the world and create like this whole thing. It's just, it's you listening to something. It's not church. And guys, we need the church. Matter of fact, in an age of deconstruction and persecution, we need the church more than ever. We're not going to make it. But this, again, also isn't a new problem. In her letter to the Hebrews, the author's writing to a Hebrew audience. By the way, did you guys see the Hebrews Jeopardy thing? Did you see this, Brad? Oh, real rabbit trail, kind of fun. No legitimate New Testament scholar really believes Paul wrote the Epistle to the Hebrews. Is that correct? Yeah, Jeopardy's final Jeopardy question. I don't know if you guys saw this. What letter by the Apostle Paul has the most Old Testament quotations? And a guy went with Romans, which should have won it, but it was Hebrews. They said it was Hebrews. So Jeopardy doesn't know the Bible, just so you guys know. It was a big controversy in the biblical world. But anyways, back to Hebrews. Paul didn't write it. We don't know who did, but the author of Hebrews, he's writing this letter to a community where persecution is kicked up and people are losing their jobs. People are losing their businesses. By the way, most early followers of Jesus were Hebrew people. They were Jewish people ethnically. And by faith tradition. And so they're now are following this new Messiah, and they're experiencing persecution they never experienced, just as the Hebrew people at that time during Second Temple Judaism. So persecution's kicked up, they're losing jobs, businesses, respect in the community. Some are being put in prison, some are even being put to death. And then on top of that, like, church is just messy, right? Like, even if all that was happening, even if that wasn't happening, church is just hard. And in the face of all of that, the book of Hebrews asks this question, or they're asking this question, Hebrews is addressing it, is Jesus worth it? Like in their cultural moment, they're going, before I met Jesus, my life didn't have this much problem or demands on it. Is Jesus really better? Again, we're Hebrew people. Is the new covenant really better? Maybe the old covenant was better. Maybe the law was better than Jesus. And so the author is helping them understand how Jesus' new covenant is better than and a true fulfillment of the old covenant, that he is worth it, that he is worth enduring persecution for. And again, in an age of deconstruction and persecution from a secular culture hostile to the scriptures teaching, a lot of people are asking that question right now, is Jesus worth it? Because it'd be really easy to just go on Instagram and be like, I'm deconstructing, yay! And I move on. And I get brunch back on Sunday mornings, football back, if that's what you're into. I don't have to work out conflicts with people. I don't have to submit my life to something bigger than myself. And they're asking, is Jesus worth it? They were asking, is Jesus worth losing social standing for, or even my life for? They were thinking maybe we should go back to the old covenant. And one of the things that they were considering leaving behind was worship gatherings where they worshiped the Jesus they're considering leaving. And again, Hebrew people would have had a rich tradition of worship. And so Hebrews 10:19-25, the author's going to say, hey, new covenant worship's way different, and you need it. Hebrews 10:19-25, it says, "Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have boldness to enter the sanctuary through the blood of Jesus, he was inaugurated for us a new and living way through the curtain, that is through his flesh. And since we have a great high priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed in pure water." We've got this new priest, and he has cleansed us, and he welcomes us. The God that they would have known the stories about, who's at a distance, he is holy and they are not. He is bringing the unholy in. He is personally cleansing them. And then he says something, if that gospel reality is true, verse 23, "Let us hold on then to the confession of our hope without wavering, since he who promised is faithful. And let us consider one another in order to provoke love and good works, not neglecting to gather together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other all the more as you see the day coming." Someone needs to provoke you into love and good works. And I need that too. I need someone to remind me of what I've put my hope and faith in, because I forget. I need to be encouraged. Anybody here could do with less encouragement? You have your own inner critic, your own narratives from your family of origin, you have your own stuff from your boss, or just messages you see on TV, the constant ways we feel torn down explicitly or implicitly in our culture and in our relationships. We need people to remind us, this is who you are in Jesus, and you are loved, and you have purpose and meaning and dignity and value and respect. It doesn't matter what those people say about you. That's who you are. You need to hear that. This space should reinforce that. This is who Jesus says you are. All throughout the scriptures, when people encounter God, he reminds them of who they are. We can go on and on and on, but the author's message is Jesus is better. He is worth it. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Keep moving forward together. And some of you need to hear this message today that Jesus is still worth it. In the same way that the author of Hebrews would implore them to say, hey, you don't want to go back to the old covenant. It is not better. What I want to say to you today is you don't want to go back to your old life. It's not better. You don't want to go back to an old identity where you were defined by performance, where you were enslaved to what people thought of you, where you had more money than you do now, but you were more worried about money than you are now, when love was conditional, when you had to compare yourself to others to feel any sense of worth, where guilt and shame were close companions, where addictions were numerous, where loneliness was acute, where you actually took an atheistic materialism to its logical conclusion and realized you had no purpose. Church is hard and messy, and persecution sucks, and church burn is real, and abuse is real. Even in our culture where persecution isn't physical yet, it's still real. I would say some people would rather be put to death than experience the disapproval of the crowds. With all of that happening, it's not better than Jesus, as hard as following Jesus is. Isolating when you're, by the way, it's been a lot of work done. I know you guys are going to do, I think, a series on deconstruction. You guys are working through want to work on some stuff content-wise. But one of the things that they've done, deconstruction has been happening enough now in the way that we've been talking about the last 7 years. People walking away from their faith for very specific reasons. And one of the things that they're finding is that everyone kind of goes through that at some level. The people who make it and keep following Jesus stay in community while they wrestle in doubt. It's so crucial. Brad is dead. You can ask hard questions. You can, about faith and about the church and about history and about how you feel in different moments. But if you don't do them together, there's a whole world that'll tell you online what to believe and why. My favorite thing is they're don't tithe, churches are evil, but give to my Patreon. I'll tell you how to not have faith. And your heart in its moments will go, yeah, I'll do that. But instead the church says, no, let's follow Jesus together. Isolating from other followers of Jesus and not sitting under gospel teaching is the key in terms of who moves on into true disbelief. And I struggled because I'm human. Again, we're bombarded with messages each week and stories and narratives, and we need to be reminded of the truer story, the meta-narrative, the gospel, or we're not going to make it. Again, there's too many things that's vying for our affection, our commitment, our emotions, our resources, our time, our worship. This should be the space where we actually worship the only one who deserves our worship. The only one who, when we worship him, we walk away filled, not ripped off. So Sunday gatherings are so important. They help keep us close to Jesus. And by the way, it's not just the preaching. It is communion. It is prophetic words. Again, every Family of Churches retreat, which you should go to, Romans chapter 1, I look at it, Paul says, I long to come preach the gospel to you. You guys are already Christians. And he says, I love to be mutually encouraged by you. If the Apostle Paul thought he needed to be encouraged by baby Christians in Rome because they have the Spirit of God, they have something to offer him, you need encouragement. And that should happen here. Happen out over coffee. I was, Jackie and I, we were at a wedding, I don't know, 4 years ago. And one of our kids was struggling with something, and there was a friend of ours whose son was struggling with something similar, not exactly the same. It's a cocktail hour at a wedding. This guy's a brother in Christ. And we talk for like 10 minutes. He gives my wife a hug, and he prays for us. And there was such hope in that moment. That kind of stuff happens all the time at Sunday gatherings if you come in with the right lenses. If you're like, I need to get in and get out as fast as I can, you're going to miss some of those moments. So real quick, I want to get real practical. I want to say this. I've got one big point. It's this. As followers of Jesus, we are called to prioritize the gathering. As followers of Jesus, we're called to prioritize the gathering. And I have 6 genuinely quick points. The first one is we need to actually be at gathering, right? That's what it says, right? Be at gathering. Plan to be there. Yeah, plan to be there, okay? I try to talk to our church about this. We have a young church, and a lot of them are in their careers. They have a decent amount of money, a lot of double income, no children. And for them, they're like, you know what we should do on the weekend? Every weekend, go out of town on 3 days. There's a thing. It's Thanksgiving on Thursday. We need to be gone till Tuesday because we can work remotely, and we make enough money to do that. And that's how they're living their life. And I've had to actually over time call them and say, hey guys, can I challenge you to be back for Sunday? Because when you're not here, there's something you don't receive, but also there's something a bunch of other people don't receive because you have the Holy Spirit and you're a part of this family. I said, man, imagine, again, some of you guys experienced the pain of this, family dinners where the person who's supposed to be there consistently isn't there. They're not there because of addiction or grief or death. And you go, man, the church is like that. Like it matters if you're here or you're not here on Sundays. It's not just to hear a sermon. I would challenge you guys. By the way, if you're serving in kids once a month, which is a good idea in a church this size, if you're missing 2 to 3 times for like travel or whatever, if you get sick and serving kids, that means you're in gathering maybe once every 6 weeks. It's not just what you receive here. It's also God does something together. There's a prophetic word. There's a couple prophetic words. There's some messages. God's moving the church in a direction, and you're missing it. And you're like, I don't feel very connected to this church. Dude, you're never here. Whoa, we're just like dropping. There's all this secret information. You're just dropping stuff on us. Dude, we've announced this 6 weeks in a row in gathering. I love you. You're not around enough. So try to be, again, stuff happens. We don't want to be Pharisees. If you're genuinely sick, please stay home. If you have work on a Sunday and you can't get out of it, it's not up to you. You don't have that privilege. Man, that's fine. Maybe I would even say find a church where you can be consistent, though. I'd rather have you in a church like being a part of that than just being here once every 8 weeks so they can have your, and I know Brad and Sarah would say that. They don't want to just have a name on a list of a person who's not getting the nourishment they need. Does that make sense? Try to be here, like really try to be here. If you're tired, this is a big TMI moment. Last night I had food poisoning, I'm pretty sure. It's a rough moment. I won't get into details, but I was up to about 4 a.m. doing stuff I don't like to do between 1 and 4 a.m. And you know what? I could have called Brad and be like, hey man, my body's been through it. And maybe it would have been fine, but I actually just said, hey, you know what? I prayed about it. I feel okay, but I want to come and do this. And there are men and women in our church who make those choices, just as men and women who show up to minister and to love and to be here. It's possible you have to, let me put it this way. If this is a worship gathering, you have to sacrifice some stuff sometimes to be here. That's part of the worship. It's not just the singing. I said, you're worth my time and energy, Jesus. Where people go, oh, dang, you really, we have people in our church, when they have visitors in from out of town, Like our family's in town, they're not Christians. And so you know what we start to see happen as people grow is we tell our parents or our siblings, hey, we love you. We're going to go for 2 hours to this gathering because we worship Jesus. And then we'll be right back to hang. You're welcome to come, but if you don't want to come, we're still going to go. Because again, we worship Jesus. And it leads to all kinds of beautiful evangelism. We've had people get saved over a few months and years as they're interacting because they go, oh, you actually believe this stuff. It actually impacts your life. We should probably talk about that. Like, you're pretty into this. Does that make sense? So, man, try to be there. Another one is prepare through margin. These next three are from a guy named James Bryan Smith, who wrote a book called The Good and Beautiful Community. I highly recommend. But these next three are not mine. They're his. They're quick, and then I have two. But I thought this was helpful. Prepare through margin. James Bryan Smith says, simply getting to worship with the right attitude is a challenge for many of us. The culprit is not our lack of desire, but our lack of temporal margin. The proper attitude, by the way, 10 seconds on this. I think most people's neglecting the gathering is unintentional. I think it's manslaughter, not murder, if that makes sense. Like you're drifting and you're not planning well, and then you miss the gathering. I don't think people are like, it happens from time to time, but like, I hate the church, I hate the leaders, I hate the worship music, I hate the bread, I hate the building, I'm not going, I'm rebelling, right? Who wants to join me? I'm raising my flag. We're not going to gathering anymore. We're doing brunch. Team brunch, we're going to fight, right? The overlords who make us listen to sermon. Like, I don't think it's that thing. I think it's like we didn't plan and we let life happen. The enemy is like, yeah, let's let life happen. And then you're like, yeah, I'm tired, whatever. So he says, it's not a lack of desire. I don't want to guilt anyone today. I think it's oftentimes we're not thinking about it. The proper attitude for worship cannot be cultivated in the 10 seconds we spend walking through the narthex. He's Methodist. That's the lobby. We must prepare for worship long before that. One way is to go to bed early on the evening before worship. This will allow us to awaken earlier, which will create some margin in terms of time. We need a few hours to eat and dress and prepare our hearts for worship. Time margin is thus necessary in order to create heart margin. Another guy named Dane Ortland says this. He says, if you are hit or miss on a Sunday, it will impact your spiritual health. If you're late or if you don't engage in worship, it will impact your experience. And failing to take the corporate gathering seriously doesn't help your brothers and sisters who need your voice, your encouragement, your solidarity, your prayer, and your joy. Margin also prepares you for the inevitable drama at home. He continues, prepare for drama at home on Sunday morning. Drama may happen on Saturday night, but very often there are issues at home on Sunday mornings that you don't have the rest of the week. The devil would love to make you grumpy on Sunday morning or to distract you, keeping the word from having its effect on you. Don't raise your hands. Anybody ever get into a fight on the way to church with their spouse, with their roommate? Or got a text from your mom or your dad? You're like, why? Why right now? Your kids. Gavin Ortland says, so when you climb into your car, tell yourself in advance, someone's probably going to spill their milk or pull their sister's hair or chuck their Bible out the window. When that happens, I will pray rather than yell. It's like, this comes with it, man. It's like a football game. You're getting here. I'm going to get hit today, okay? Things are going to happen, and so margin helps you deal with that stuff and helps you show up the best way, prayerfully. Another one, arrive early. It says, a simple but effective way for me to be more attentive in worship is to come well before the service begins in order to become fully present. Richard Foster's Quaker author offers this advice. Enter the service 10 minutes early. Lift your heart in adoration to the King of Glory, okay? Get there a little early. Now, again, that might seem cheesy, but genuinely, think about it for a second. How many of you guys have gotten to a movie 10 minutes late? How does it impact the movie? Struggle a little bit, right? Like I'm glad I didn't see some of those previews, but I'm thrown, it's awkward, whatever. Man, you have a physical body that has to adjust to a new space and your mind and da-da-da-da. And when you get here, man, if you show up late, it's just hard. Also, we're not experiencing that thing together I was talking about. Your voice, your joy, your prayers. Again, it's like showing up to a wedding late, leaving early, right? You're just not going to have the same experience, nor is anyone else. Next one James Bryan Smith gives is come with holy expectancy. As previously noted, Foster encourages a sense of holy expectancy among worshipers. This can be done by a simple prayer. Spirit, speak to me. Jesus, teach me. Father, let me experience your love and power. I believe this is a prayer God loves to answer, and it is a prayer that awakens our desire. So getting there is one thing, but also your expectations matter. Your desire matters. Your bigger idea, your presence matters. I'm reading a book right now, and they've done some research, and these psychologists have found that people spend their waking thoughts, 46% of them are in the past or in the future, not dedicated to the moment they're in. We spend so much time not being present. I experienced this firsthand. My daughter Olivia had a ballet recital a few months ago, and normally when she has ballet recitals, I'm like, is she at the beginning of it? Because I want to get in there and get out of there. It's like, it's 30 performances deep. I don't know any of these kids. I don't appreciate ballet. It's awkward. Some family drama usually tied to where people are sitting. It's kind of a weird vibe with our families. And then this last time, I showed up earlier. I prayed a little bit for some other reasons, but I was able to just sit there and be present. And I'm not exaggerating. She was like 13th or something. But I allowed myself to enjoy the beauty of the art that is ballet. I allowed myself to experience the music. I allowed myself to see like what they're trying to do, what the teachers are trying to do, the care and attention they're giving these kids, and the bravery these kids are exhibiting to get up there and do that thing. Hearing music. Again, my buddy's Division I, he was a Division I college football player, big guy. He's crying, I'm crying. We're like taking in the ballet because we allowed ourselves to be present. Does that make sense? The same thing happened that was always happening, but and again, man, church infinitely more. To go, Jesus, I'm here. You love me and you're here. Let's see what happens in this next hour and a half. To me, through me, around me. You're the living God. You're in this space. Like, if I'm here, like, let's get after it. Let's engage with you, with these people that you love. For time's sake, I'm only going to do two more of these. One, this is like simple, but I think so important right now. Bring a physical Bible and a journal to church. Guys, like, please, put your phones on Do Not Disturb, okay? I love my paper Bible. You know what I love about my paper Bible? It never has news alerts that don't even matter, that stress me out. For some of the guys and gals, actually, you know what it doesn't have? Fantasy football updates live during church, or stock updates, or crypto updates, or whatever your thing is, right? It doesn't have someone swiped right, or whatever. None of that pops up on your Bible. Your phone's it's literally designed to make you addicted to it and to distract you. You're trying to cultivate presence in this space, in this moment with these people as God manifests his grace. I'm not trying to be legalistic. Like, if at all possible, put your phone on airplane mode. You do it on planes. It's probably possible. There are scenarios, health issues, family health issues, something like that, where you have to be by your phone. You have to be accessible, even for 2 hours. But man, try to get a paper Bible if you can. I know they'd love to give you one, buy you one. Brad, he would love to. Brad would love to give everyone a Bible. You know it. I know it. Journals, Bibles, that's this guy's wheelhouse, man. Like, he will find the money, okay? And then last but not least, I have 30 seconds. Work out your conflicts. And real fast, this is maybe the most important point. Work out your conflicts and relational awkwardness. This one breaks my heart. I see a lot of people who leave churches and they're like, I just don't experience God here anymore. And so often I'm so aware of all of the broken relationships they've got going on right now. It's almost like it's possible that God's moving you on, but not like this. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus teaches this. Matthew chapter 5, verse 23 to 24, it says, so if you are offering your gift on the altar, and there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you. This isn't, you have something against them. This isn't Matthew 18, I need to go to them. This is, I know it's weird. I know they have something against me. I've heard about it from someone else, or I've picked up on it, or there's some weird passive-aggressive stuff. I'm not stupid. I know that. That was a verbal subtweet. I know what's happening here. That was about me, whatever it is, or you think it might be. Man, go move towards them. Jesus is like urgent about this. Verse 24, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled with your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Jesus was speaking to people who lived about 80 miles away from the temple. If they go for a festival or a feast, and they go and they offer a sacrifice as a lower class family, 80 miles. They don't have a car, right? For them, this is a big deal. This is like you fly to London to sing at a worship gathering, and then you realize, oh, something's 7 hours away, and I need to make it right. Or New York, I guess, would be 7 hours. It's a big deal. Like, before you worship, go make things right. We often wait way too long to move towards each other, family. And the entire time we wait, it gets worse. Relational stuff, it's like when you get a cavity. How many of you guys love the dentist? Cool. Okay, yeah, no one, right? My dentist is called I Love My Dentist. It's in Tijuana. It's amazing. But it's like it's no one loves the dentist, right? And why? Because it's scary, it hurts, all that stuff. And when you get a cavity, you're nervous. You don't want to deal with it. But if you don't deal with your cavity, it becomes a root canal. Okay? After that, it gets weird. They're pulling teeth out. They're putting fake teeth in. They're drilling into your jaw. It gets weird. The longer you let it fester, the worse it gets. It's like leaving gas running. And then all of a sudden, your relationship can't handle anything. It's like if you light a candle, it's an explosion. Stuff that wouldn't offend you if someone else did it. If they do it, you're upset. Jesus is teaching in this passage here that the quality of our horizontal relationships impacts the experience of our vertical relationships. This isn't always true, but often it is that when we struggle in worship gatherings, it's often that there's something we need to deal with in our hearts with another person. Again, by inference, you can also pick up that your experience of God in worship at a worship gathering might be hindered by unresolved relational issues or bitterness, especially if those people are in the gathering with you. Peter treats, if you mistreat your wife, your prayers will be hindered. I don't fully know how that works. Again, if you don't love your brother or sister, you're going to struggle in your relationship with God. If you don't love your brothers and sisters, 1 John says, if you don't love the church, the love of God is not in you. So Jesus says, if your brother or sister has something against you and you have a worship offering, lay it on the altar and go talk to the person. And so here's where I'll close. Hebrews 10 just talked about how we have this high priest who has every reason to not let us into his presence, who has every reason to say, you have no right to be in the Holy of Holies, but he chooses to move towards us. He tears the veil. He cleanses us. He makes us right. He draws us in. So 2 applications on that. 1, he did all that so you could be with him in the church, like in community together. Like this is part of his presence that you can only experience here, genuinely. Not Restored LA, that's a cult, but like the gathered church that you're a part of. And we don't neglect that gift. And then 2, just as Jesus moved towards us when he didn't have to, if you need to move towards a brother or a sister, even if you're, by the way, last thing, even if you're not sure there's something, just check out your assumption. Hey, I feel like something might be off. Have I offended you? Worst case scenario, they go, yeah. And then you talk about it and you can move forward. Best case scenario, they're like, no. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm not crazy. I just love you. I want to move towards you. Let's take care about our relationship. So right now, I don't know if it's worship team, but yeah, hand over.
Well done. Thank you. Love you.